After Napoleon's defeat in the Napoleonic Wars, from 1814 to 1815, the great powers met up in Vienna to carve out the borders of Europe, which went relatively successful in our timeline. Fast forward a couple centuries later, and my 15th century history class, which I just finished a few days ago, held a simulation for the Congress of Vienna, so that way me and all my classmates could see what it was like to be a diplomat during the Congress of Vienna, which I'll be talking about in this video, and then later I'll make a part 2 video discussing the potential impacts of the alternate Congress. I've also got a special guest, one of my classmates, the man, the myth, the legend, Gary.
Hi, thanks, Ark.
So Gary, why don't you give us some background information on how the Congress of Vienna worked exactly for the viewers?
Well, in our Vienna Congress, we were a lot more lenient on France, and a lot of the delegations were more willing and cooperative with one another. There was still a lot of territorial ambition and needs and wants of creating a new Europe.
So how we were divided into teams is that we were put into groups, and then one representative from the group would draw from a hat, and then we get a randomly selected country. So for my group, I drew from the hat and ended up picking Britain. Our teacher unfortunately placed Gary in a different group, so when they drew from their hat, they ended up picking Austria. Along with Austria and Britain, there was also 3 other groups, which were Prussia, France, and Russia. After our countries were selected, all of our groups then went into 5 separate soundproof rooms in the library in our school, where we then discussed our strategies for negotiations with the other countries. I'll talk a little more about those discussions later, but just know for now that for a couple of days we negotiated with the other countries for plans to divide up Europe. Anyways, 2 periods worth of negotiations and a week's worth of snow days later, because it's Canada, and we now fast forward to the Congress. For the Congress Day, me and all my classmates had to dress up in costumes that we crafted together that were based upon the countries that we ended up picking. As you can see here, my costume is looking quite peachy, while also clearly being accurate to what I was going for my British attire. All I needed was just a cup of tea and one of those weird one-eyed glasses, and no one would even be able to tell the difference between me and an actual British guy. Anyways, with all the background information out of the way, now we can get on to the part that we've all been waiting for, the Congress of Vienna, starting off with the division of France.
As part of France losing the Napoleonic Wars, the Congress had agreed that Spain would regain control of Catalonia for reparation from the Peninsular War. Piedmont, as well, in Italy, would gain independence along with the Papal States. With the Austrian Netherlands, this was a pretty significant change from real life, where the France were actually allowed to keep it in return for territorial expansion for Austria going into southern Germany. This was to be seen as a way for Austria to expand its borders without having to spend money for territory it's not directly connected with, and as well, this wouldn't seem as an aggravated expansion from the Austrian Empire, whilst also keeping the power balance in check for Europe. The Austrian Empire would regain control of the Illyrian provinces, as France had annexed that very important piece early on as well.
So we didn't really have time to really go over Italy, so for the sake of this, we're just going to assume that all the states that were subjected by France, they'll gain their independence, as well as all the other French vassals that they had control over. Next up is Napoleon. We're all unanimously agreed that he had to be deposed of. The first main hurdle that we had to overcome was France, because although they agreed that they wanted to depose Napoleon, what we couldn't agree on was the government, because the French strongly advocated for having a republic like they did at one point during the French Revolution. However, everyone else, because we're all monarchs, wanted the French to have a constitutional monarchy, because we were worried that if they were to get a republic, then it could destabilize our monarchies. After I basically told the French team that they, lost the war, they eventually caved in. And then there's the next issue. Who would be the new French monarch? During the negotiations before the Congress, one of the first things that my team wanted to establish was having a British monarch presence in the new French royal lineage. By combining a member of the British monarchy with a member of France's monarchy will help create better relations between Britain and France, because Britain will always have some sort of influence over France because of the common monarchy lineage. For France's new monarch, no one actually knows what the monarch is because France didn't have time to pick one out. However, what we do know is that it isn't a member of the Louis family. As for my team, after careful consideration, we decided to go with the monarch that we felt would become the best queen for France. Who we chose to have this honor is only a reflection of what me and the boys thought would be best for France and Britain and Europe as a whole, and nothing more than that. So with that, I would like to introduce you to the one and only Princess Charlotte the whatever. How many Princess Charlottes before her is not important. What is important is all the attributes on why we chose her to become the next Queen of France. The reason why we chose Princess Charlotte to become the next Queen of France is because she's a strong, independent female who has a kind heart and great personality. And for those reasons and more is why me and the boys decided to pick Princess Charlotte to become the next Queen of France. Isn't that right, Gary? Gary, what you doing over there?
Oh, nothing. Just admiring her big personality.
So after we decided to pick Princess Charlotte to become the next Queen of France, the last thing that we had to do was convince everybody that she is the right person for the job and that Britain wasn't using this as an excuse to gain control over France. Surprisingly, all of the delegations agreed with this. Unfortunately, some of the reasons weren't as noble as other people. For example, when this one girl in our class shared her opinions on Princess Charlotte becoming the next Queen of France, she did not mention any of the attributes that would make her an amazing leader. No, she then instead said something that completely shocked the entire classroom. She said, and I quote, that the reason why Princess Charlotte should be the next Queen of France is because of her boobies. Now, in my 17 years of living, I thought I've seen it all, but no, apparently I haven't. Never would have I imagined that a historical figure would help someone come out as a lesbian. As you could probably imagine, my entire class went absolutely hysteric for about a solid 15 minutes before the teacher told us to shut the hell up. So after all the delegations decided on ousting Napoleon and replacing him with the now Queen Charlotte and whoever France decides to go with, we can now discuss the division of the Confederation of the Rhine. So splitting up the Confederation of the Rhine is what I consider my magnum opus.
That means masterpiece for you dummy boys.
The proposal for the division of the Confederation of the Rhine started during the negotiation period when Team Prussia showed up to our booth. I then told them that we would be advocating for them to split the Confederation of the Rhine between them and the Austrian team, in exchange for them supporting the rest of our ambitious plans. The Austrians signed a bit later, and then we had enough signatures to take it to the Congress Day, where we all unanimously agreed to partition it. Alright, it's been a minute since we've heard Garrett talk. Garrett, you have anything that you want to say about the Illyrian provinces, since you and the rest of the Austrians were the ones who were negotiating for them?
Since it wasn't hard to argue the legitimacy of Austrian claims on the Illyrian provinces, it was easy to get the agreement upon all European states for Austria to reincorporate the Illyrian provinces back into its territory.
The last land change that we negotiated was Poland being divided between Prussia and Russia. The reason why we decided to split Poland is, well, because my class is a bunch of racists, to put it lightly. Now, me and Gary, we do not support those views at all. We definitely did not suggest to Russia and Prussia to divide Poland, and we definitely did not provide a clear plan to divide it, and we definitely did not rally up the entire class to support this, because again, me and Gary, we were not racists. So anyways, they get annexed. And with that concludes all the territorial changes in the Congress. The next thing we need to talk about is the Great Powers Alliance. The Great Powers Alliance, shockingly enough, was mainly my idea. The original vision for it was to be a purely EU-like economical alliance that all 5 of the countries that participated in the Congress would be in. Then later on, the economical alliance could spread to other countries in Europe. By creating this EU-like alliance, what this would do is promote economical trade among the European powers, which would make it so that the great powers would become less likely to fight major deadly wars because it would affect their trade. While we were talking to Prussia about the division of the Confederation of the Rhine, I also proposed this idea to them and they signed on. I then went over to the Russians and pitched my plan to them, and then one of them, ironically enough, the one girl that I was talking about earlier, said that she came up with a plan similar to mine, but instead it was more of a military alliance. And how it would work is that all the great powers who participated in the Congress would be part of it, similar to my EU alliance. And we would all agree to make sure that all of our monarchies remained in power, so that republics like the one that rose during the French Revolution and the American Revolution wouldn't happen again, which kind of happened in our timeline over time. We then agreed to combine our ideas, and we pitched a new idea to my team along with the Prussians, and then we all agreed to change the Great Powers Alliance to include the military aspect of it.
An interesting part about this Congress as well is the Austrian delegation, which I was part of. We focused on a lot of colonial possession as well, not just what is happening in Europe. An interesting thing that a couple of my teammates, I guess you could say, or fellow delegates made was that we should annex the French Caribbean colonies, as it would be easier for France not to hold on to them, as they are an economic burden, is the argument we made. And this would also give Austria a little bit more land, but as well help Austria grow its industry and its economy.
I would also just like to add that those 2 islands that the Austrians gained took like an hour and a half to negotiate. The entire time, everyone was just like, why do you want these 2 islands? And then the entire time I was just like, who cares? Give them the islands. We're wasting time, because there's one other thing I'd like to talk about at the end of the video. And then eventually everyone gave up and caved in. And then I didn't realize that it was only 2 islands that he was negotiating for. So as I was making this map, I was like, are you kidding me? There's only 2 islands that he's gaining that took like an hour and a half for him to negotiate. For reference, splitting the Confederation of the Rhine took less time than for Gary to gain 2 islands.
Not a lot also changed colonial-wise, but Britain also took French Guiana.
Oh yeah, that's why we advocated for you guys to get the 2 Caribbean islands. This part we didn't do in the Congress, but whatever. I feel like this is what would happen in real life. So we're gonna give this Netherlands colony to Britain, since they had control of it when they were occupied by Napoleon. In her timeline, Britain gave these colonies back to the Netherlands, but since they now own French Guiana, I feel like realistically they'd keep this colony to connect both of the colonies. Now, although this isn't technically part of the Congress, I am technically allowed to do this because I'm on the British team and Britain had full control over that Netherlands colony. Therefore, technically, I can decide if I can keep it or not, and there's nothing anyone else can do about it. I'm also gonna pity give these 3 islands off of the coast of Venezuela that the Netherlands owned until Britain gained control of it, like their other colony during their occupation. So now instead of having 3 islands, you can have 6 islands. You're welcome, buddy. And now for the last part of the treaty. With 1 hour ticking down on the clock, we stepped up to the front of the class. Our palms were sweaty, knees weak, and arms were heavy from carrying this entire Congress on our backs. Sure, we were nervous, but on the surface we looked calm and ready to drop one last bomb. We were gonna partition Austria-Hungary. I mean the Ottoman Empire. That would have been a pretty nice rhyme if it were Austria-Hungary.
So I, as part of the Austrian delegation, went up to ARC and began discussing a coalition against the Ottoman Empire, where most of the states at the Congress would gain something of the Ottoman coalition territorially, or economically, or by other means.
And the Austrian delegation promised Britain to have the most influence over the new carved-up Ottoman Empire. They then said that in turn for supporting the division of the Ottoman Empire, they would support them in splitting the Confederation of the Rhine between North and South, which was the exact same plan that we proposed to the Prussians earlier. So all we had to do was just smile and nod. So as the Austrian delegation continued to go into more detail of what the partition of the Ottoman Empire would exactly look like, all me and the rest of the British delegation did was just smile and nod, knowing that they were basically giving us free land. So when we presented our idea to the class, almost all the great powers agreed for the various benefits that it would provide, except for Prussia, who didn't really have any problems with the Ottoman Empire in the real world, so therefore they didn't really want to take a part in conquering them, and we tried to reassure them that they didn't have to participate in the war, they could just send us supplies. But yeah, for some reason they still didn't listen, and it was just like a long 1 hour argument, though eventually we all agreed to sign that we would partition the Ottoman Empire.
But we never got around to the actual completion of an actual strategy to develop after the Ottomans were loosed.
So therefore, that concludes the alternate Congress of Vienna. As you can see, a lot has changed before and after the Congress. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell to get notified on all future videos. And also, stay tuned for part 2 of this video, where we will discuss the division of the Ottoman Empire along with the lasting effects from the alternate treaty. Thanks again to Gary for helping out with the video, along with helping out during the actual Congress itself. With his help, I would have achieved what I have done in the Congress. With his help, all the hard work and dedication we put into achieving what we wanted to in this Congress to create my magnum opus.
That means masterpiece for you dummy boys.